Most NFL fans cheer for the quarterback, but the real financial geniuses are the guys you've never heard of. While stars grab the headlines, anonymous long snappers and gunners are using salary cap loopholes to turn practice squad seats into multi-million-dollar empires. This is how the league's most overlooked players became its most calculated business assets. At 11:47 on a cold Saturday night, Darius Reed stood alone beneath the fluorescent lights of an NFL practice facility, holding a contract that could change his life for exactly 24 hours. The Lake City Sentinels had elevated him from the practice squad for Sunday's game. If he dressed, covered punts, and survived without getting injured, he would earn more money in one afternoon than his mother made in 2 months. But through the half-open door of the personnel office, Darius heard the general manager discussing him as if he were not a man at all. "He gives us 4 phases for the price of 1 roster spot," Martin Voss said. "Use him tomorrow, send him back Monday, and we keep the veteran off the active payroll." Another executive laughed. "If Reed makes 1 tackle, he saves us almost $2 million in next year's roster planning." Darius looked down at the contract in his hand. To the fans, he was an unknown player wearing number 42. To the team, he was a mathematical advantage. What nobody inside that office knew was that Darius had spent the previous 18 months learning how the same invisible system could work for him. Before the season ended, the practice squad gunner they treated like a disposable number would control a business worth more than the contracts of several starters. But first, he had to survive Sunday. Darius was 27 years old, 6 feet tall, and built more like a track sprinter than an NFL receiver. He had dark brown skin, tightly cropped black hair, and a thin scar beside his left eyebrow from a high school game in East St. Louis. He had never been famous. He had never been a first-round prospect. No camera crew had visited his childhood home on draft night. When the final name was announced during the draft 5 years earlier, Darius had been sitting on his mother's couch with 30 relatives crowded around him. Everyone had pretended the silence did not hurt. His mother, Rochelle, had squeezed his shoulder. "God doesn't need a commissioner to call your name," she had told him. 3 hours later, the Sentinels offered Darius an undrafted free agent contract. The signing bonus was $12,000. After taxes and agent fees, he received less than 8. At the time, it felt like a fortune. He bought his mother a new refrigerator, paid 2 months of her mortgage, and arrived at training camp with 1 suitcase, 4 pairs of cleats, and the belief that effort would protect him from business decisions. It did not. Darius learned quickly that the NFL did not have 32 simple rosters. Each team had multiple invisible rosters operating at the same time. There were players the organization built around, players it depended upon, players it developed, players it stored, and players it kept available in case somebody more important got hurt. Darius belonged to the last group. He entered the league as a wide receiver, but there were 6 receivers ahead of him. 3 had larger contracts. 2 were draft picks the general manager needed to justify. 1 was the quarterback's closest friend. During his first preseason, Darius caught 9 passes, scored twice, and still got cut. The special teams coordinator, Ron Velez, found him cleaning out his locker. "You want to stay in this league?" Velez asked. Darius looked at him. "Yes, sir." "Then stop trying to become the 5th receiver." "What should I become?" "The first man down the field after every punt." Darius spent the next year transforming himself into a gunner, the player who sprinted along the sideline during punts while 2 opponents grabbed, shoved, and tried to knock him out of bounds. He learned how to release from double teams, how to locate the returner without slowing down, and how to tackle without giving officials a reason to throw a flag. It was brutal, anonymous work. When a quarterback threw a touchdown, 60,000 people screamed his name. When Darius forced a returner to step out at the 12-yard line, the broadcast usually cut to a commercial. Yet coaches noticed. By his 3rd season, Darius had been signed, released, promoted, demoted, protected, elevated, and waived so many times that his mother stopped asking whether he was officially on the team. "Are you playing this week?" she would ask instead. "Maybe. Are they paying you? For now. Then call me when something becomes real." The only person inside the facility who seemed comfortable with the uncertainty was Caleb Shaw, the Sentinels' 36-year-old long snapper. Caleb was thin, quiet, and almost completely unknown outside the building. He had played 12 NFL seasons without scoring a point, catching a pass, or appearing in a national commercial. Most fans could not have recognized him in uniform. Caleb also owned 14 rental properties, 2 car washes, and part of a medical billing company. Darius discovered this accidentally during an away trip. A younger player complained that the team hotel had charged him for damaging a television. Caleb opened his laptop to help dispute the fee, and Darius noticed a financial dashboard displaying property income. Darius stared at the numbers. "Is that yours?" Caleb glanced at the screen. "Part of it." "You have another job?" "This is the other job." Darius laughed, believing it was a joke. Caleb did not. "The NFL is seasonal income," he said. "The business is permanent." Darius pulled his chair closer. Caleb explained that specialists lived in a different professional world from star players. Quarterbacks and pass rushers could demand long contracts. Long snappers, backup kickers, reserve safeties, and special teams players survived through reliability, relationships, timing, and financial discipline. They understood roster rules because they had to. A star could ignore the salary cap until negotiations began. A fringe player had to understand why one contract made him attractive in September but expensive in October. He had to know why teams preferred younger players in certain weeks, veterans in others, and practice squad elevations when injuries created temporary needs. Every rule has a business purpose, Caleb said, and every business purpose creates an opportunity for somebody. Darius leaned back, for the team. For anyone paying attention, Caleb had received his first substantial NFL check at 24. Instead of buying a luxury car, he had purchased a damaged duplex outside Indianapolis with two other specialists. They repaired it during the offseason and rented it to players attending nearby training programs. The next year they bought another property near a different team facility. They knew exactly what temporary players needed because they had lived that life themselves. Month-to-month leases, furnished rooms, no large deposit, space for recovery equipment. Flexible checkout dates because a player might be released on a Tuesday morning and signed in another state by Wednesday night. Their tenants were practice squad players, undrafted rookies, coaches, trainers, and agents. The business grew quietly. Caleb never posted photographs beside the properties. He never called himself an entrepreneur during interviews. He simply used the league's instability as information. The average person sees a player getting cut, Caleb said. I see a man who needs housing in a new city before tomorrow morning. Darius thought about every hotel room he had paid for while waiting to learn whether he would remain employed. He thought about storage fees, last-minute flights, training costs, agent commissions, and the apartment lease he had broken after being released from a team in Arizona. How much money do fringe players waste moving around? Darius asked. Caleb gave him a tired smile. Enough to make other people rich. That conversation changed the way Darius saw the league. He began keeping records. Every time a player joined the practice squad, Darius noted the position, age, experience, housing situation, training expenses, agent percentage, and length of stay. He tracked which teams elevated gunners, return specialists, backup kickers, and long snappers. He studied how often specialists moved between organizations and how quickly they needed services after receiving a call. At first, his notes were written inside a cheap black notebook. Then he built a spreadsheet. Soon, the spreadsheet became a database. Darius noticed that special teams players moved more frequently than many other positions because their skills transferred easily between systems. A gunner did not need to memorize 200 offensive plays. A long snapper did not need to understand every defensive adjustment. Coaches could sign specialists on short notice and use them almost immediately. That made them valuable. It also made them disposable. Teams benefited from the flexibility. Agents earned commissions each time contracts changed. Training facilities collected monthly fees whether players remained employed or not. Landlords charged deposits and penalties. The player carried almost all the risk. Darius called Caleb one night. What if the players own the services they keep paying for? Caleb was silent for several seconds. What services? Housing, training spaces, transportation, contract review, tax planning, maybe emergency loans that don't charge criminal interest. You planning to become a bank? I'm planning to stop borrowing from people who know exactly how desperate we are. Caleb agreed to meet him the next morning. They sat inside a diner across from the practice facility. Darius placed his laptop on the table between two plates of eggs and showed Caleb the numbers. Over 4 seasons, Darius had played beside or trained with 83 fringe players. Collectively, they had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on temporary housing, moving costs, off-season training, agent advances, and rushed financial services. Most of the money left their community immediately. Darius proposed creating a member-owned company designed specifically for players who lived between the active roster and unemployment. He called it Fourth Phase. Football coaches often describe special teams as the game's third phase after offense and defense. Darius believed the business of survival was the fourth. The company would begin with furnished housing near NFL facilities. Members would pay predictable weekly rates rather than deposits and year-long leases. Part of every payment would go into an emergency fund owned by the players. Later, Fourth Phase could negotiate group rates with trainers, accountants, moving companies, and insurance providers. Caleb studied the plan. You know why this won't be easy? Because nobody respects special teams? No, because too many people make money from players being confused. Darius already knew one of them. Victor Hale had represented him since his rookie year. Victor was polished, persuasive, and always available when contracts needed to be signed. He wore tailored suits, drove a black luxury SUV, and called every client family. He had also earned a percentage of every dollar Darius made. When Darius needed $6,000 after being released during his second season, Victor arranged an advance through a lending company. Darius received the money within 24 hours. He eventually repaid more than $11,000. At the time, Victor had told him that was the price of staying ready. After Darius showed him the Fourth Phase proposal, Victor's expression tightened. You need to focus on football, he said. This helps players focus on football. It makes you look distracted. Caleb owns properties. Caleb has a 12-year career. You have a practice squad locker. Darius folded his arms. That's exactly why the company matters. Victor walked toward the window of his office. Teams do not like players organizing side businesses around roster movement. Why? Because they might think you're using inside information. I'm using my own experience. That distinction won't matter when they decide whether to sign you. Darius understood the warning beneath Victor's words. Fringe players were expected to remain grateful, quiet, and available. Anything that made a team question their obedience could end their careers. Victor stepped closer. Let me handle the business side. I can introduce the idea to investors. What investors? People who understand how to scale. And what would they own? Victor smiled. That depends on how much risk they take. Darius closed the laptop. The following week he incorporated fourth phase without Victor. Caleb invested $50,000. Darius invested nearly everything he had saved, including the money he had planned to use for his mother's mortgage. 3 other specialists contributed smaller amounts. They purchased a 6-bedroom house 15 minutes from the Sentinel's facility. The property had been sitting vacant for months. It needed plumbing repairs, new flooring, furniture, and a complete kitchen renovation. Darius spent most of the off-season working beside contractors, assembling beds, painting walls, and carrying broken cabinets into a rented dumpster. His teammates teased him. "Million-dollar athlete doing construction," one player said. Darius looked at the paint on his hands. Not a million-dollar athlete yet. The first tenant arrived 3 weeks before training camp. His name was Malik Boone, a 24-year-old black safety from Georgia who had been signed after another player failed a conditioning test. Malik showed up at midnight with 2 duffel bags and $76 in his checking account. The team had given him a playbook and the address of a hotel charging nearly $200 per night. Darius gave him a room at fourth phase for a fraction of that amount. "If I get cut tomorrow," Malik asked, "then you only pay for tonight. No deposit, no contract, just the house rules." Malik looked around the furnished room. "Why are you doing this?" "Because somebody should have done it for me." By the end of training camp, every room was occupied. The tenants helped each other study, train, find transportation, and understand team paperwork. A long snapper from Texas shared contact information for a reliable accountant. A gunner from Florida helped Malik learn kickoff coverage. Caleb visited once a week to discuss budgeting. Fourth phase did not feel like a rental house. It felt like a survival center. The Sentinels coaches noticed that players living there arrived early, stayed organized, and adapted quickly. Other teams began calling Darius for available rooms when they signed specialists on short notice. Within a year, fourth phase operated 4 houses in 3 NFL cities. Darius still lived carefully. He drove the same used pickup truck and rented a modest apartment. Every active roster check went into the company or a protected savings account. He knew one injury could end his playing career before the business became stable. Then the injury came. During a preseason game, Darius beat 2 blockers and raced toward the punt returner. As he planted his right foot, an opponent struck the outside of his knee. The pain was immediate. Darius collapsed before reaching the returner. Inside the medical tent, a doctor moved his leg carefully and asked where it hurt. Darius pointed to the inside of the knee. The preliminary diagnosis was a severe sprain. The team scheduled additional imaging. Victor called before Darius reached the locker room. "Do not agree to anything until I get there," he said. The next morning, the scan showed ligament damage but no complete tear. Darius would miss several weeks. The Sentinels faced a decision. They could keep him, place him on an injury list, negotiate a settlement, or release him once medically permitted. General Manager Martin Voss invited Darius into his office. Voss was a disciplined executive who spoke with the calmness of a man who rarely experienced the consequences of his own decisions. "We value what you've done here," he began. Darius knew those words usually came before bad news. "The roster is tight," Voss continued. "We can offer an injury settlement based on the estimated recovery period." "How many weeks?" 3. The doctor said 6. "Our medical staff believes you could return sooner." Darius looked at Victor. His agent avoided eye contact. Voss slid the paperwork forward. The proposed settlement would pay Darius for 3 weeks before releasing him. "What happens if I'm not healthy after 3 weeks?" Darius asked. "You continue rehabilitation independently." "Who pays for it?" Voss folded his hands. "That would become your responsibility." Darius turned to Victor again. "What do you think?" Victor lowered his voice. "It keeps the relationship positive. We can get you signed somewhere else when you're healthy." Darius almost accepted. Then he remembered Caleb's first lesson. Every rule had a business purpose, and every business purpose created an opportunity for somebody. He asked for time to review the documents. Victor followed him into the hallway. "Don't make this difficult," the agent said. "My knee is difficult. This is how the league works." "Then explain why you want me to sign before another lawyer reads it." Victor's face changed. For the first time, Darius saw irritation replace the polished concern. "You hired me to protect your career. I hired you to represent me. That doesn't mean I stop reading." Darius sent the agreement to Lena Brooks, a sports attorney Caleb had recommended. Lena was a black woman in her early 40s who had previously worked in a team's salary cap department before opening her own practice. She reviewed the documents and called Darius that evening. "Do not sign this," she said. "Why?" "The recovery estimate is aggressive and the language could limit what they owe if complications appear. Victor said it keeps the relationship positive." Lena paused. Victor also failed to mention that one of his business partners owns the rehabilitation facility he recommended. Darius sat up. "What? The lending company you used 2 years ago is connected to the same partnership." Darius felt his stomach tighten. Victor had earned commission from his contract, benefited when Darius borrowed money, and could profit again if Darius paid for private rehabilitation. Every stage of instability created another fee. Lena negotiated a better settlement. The team agreed to cover additional rehabilitation and increase the payment period. 2 days later, Victor terminated their representation agreement. He sent Darius a short email wishing him success. Then he contacted 3 fourth-phase investors and told them the company might be violating league rules. Within a week, 2 investors withdrew. A training partner canceled its discount agreement. One landlord refused to renew a lease. Victor had understood Caleb's warning perfectly. Confused players created profitable customers, and fourth phase was teaching them too much. Darius could no longer help the business from the field. His knee required months of rehabilitation. He spent mornings rebuilding strength and afternoons studying contracts, transaction records, and operating costs. Lena helped restructure fourth phase as a legitimate membership company with independent legal compliance. Every service and financial relationship was disclosed. Players could join without giving Darius control over their football decisions. The company also started offering contract education. It did not negotiate with teams or replace certified agents. Instead, it taught players how to read the basic structure of what they were signing: salary, guarantees, bonuses, injury language, offsets, release conditions, and agent fees. The first workshop had 8 attendees. The second had 23. By the third, players from 6 teams were watching through a private online stream. Darius never told them what contracts to accept. He simply taught them what questions to ask. "How many of you know what you'll owe your agent if you're released after 1 week?" he asked during one session. Only 2 players raised their hands. "How many know whether your off-season training advance is a loan?" One hand remained up. Darius looked around the room. "You spend your whole life learning the playbook. Somebody benefits when you never learn the paperwork." The sentence spread through player group chats. Fourth phase membership doubled. But success created a new problem. Darius was still not playing. His knee healed slowly and teams questioned whether he had lost speed. Scouts attended his workouts, recorded his times, and promised to call. The phone remained silent. By midseason, Darius had been unemployed for 5 months. His mother asked whether he was ready to move on. "I'm not finished," he told her. "With football or the company, both, you might have to choose." Darius did not answer. The choice arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. The Sentinels had lost 2 special teams players to injuries. Ron Velez called Darius personally. "We need a gunner for Sunday." Darius looked down at his recovering knee. "You think I'm ready? I think you know the system, and I think you're angry enough to run through a wall." "What kind of contract?" "Practice squad first, possible elevation." Darius spoke with Lena, reviewed the paperwork, and signed. When he returned to the facility, the locker room felt both familiar and temporary. His name had been printed on a strip of tape above a small locker near the equipment room. Several former teammates hugged him. Others barely looked up. NFL rosters changed so often that players learned not to become attached to returning faces. Malik Boone was still there, but he was dealing with an ankle injury. The young safety had spent most of the year moving between the practice squad and the active roster. After practice, Malik sat beside Darius in the fourth phase house. "I think they're cutting me," he said. "What happened?" "They need a healthy corner. My agent said I should take an advance and keep training." "From who?" Malik named the same lending network Victor had once recommended. Darius closed his eyes. "How much do you need?" "10,000 to get through the offseason." "They'll make you repay almost twice that." "What choice do I have?" Fourth phase's emergency fund was not large enough to support every unemployed player, but members had recently voted to establish short-term assistance for injuries and roster transitions. Darius opened his laptop. "We can cover your housing for 3 months and part of your rehab." Malik stared at him. "For free?" "Not free, it comes from the fund you contributed to. I only paid a little. That's how a pool works. You don't have to drown alone just because you didn't put the most water in." Malik looked away, embarrassed by the emotion in his face. "My daughter's birthday is next week, then use your money for your daughter." That moment mattered more to Darius than any property valuation. Fourth phase was no longer just a business idea. It had become protection. On Saturday night, Darius was elevated for the game. That was when he overheard Martin Voss discussing his value through the personnel office door. "He gives us 4 phases for the price of 1 roster spot," Voss said. Darius understood exactly what the general manager meant. He could cover punts, cover kickoffs, return kicks in an emergency, and serve as a backup receiver. Because he had been elevated temporarily, the team gained flexibility without committing to a long-term active roster salary. Years earlier, the conversation would have made Darius feel insulted. Now it made him focused. The Sentinels were using the rules available to them. Darius intended to do the same. Sunday's game was nationally televised. Lake City faced a division rival with one of the league's most dangerous returners. Before kickoff, Ron Velez pulled Darius aside. "Keep him inside the numbers, do not give him the sideline." Darius nodded. On his first punt coverage snap, two blockers trapped him near the boundary. He fought through the first player, dipped beneath the second, and reached the returner just as the man accelerated. Darius wrapped both arms around his waist and drove him backward. The tackle happened at the 9-yard line. The stadium erupted. The broadcast announcer hesitated before identifying him. "That was number 42, Darius Reed, elevated from the practice squad yesterday." Darius returned to the sideline without celebrating. One tackle would not protect his job. In the third quarter, the Sentinels' primary returner suffered a concussion. Velez pointed toward Darius. "You're up." Darius had not returned a punt in a regular season game for 3 years. He stepped onto the field as rain began falling harder. The punt traveled high and deep. Darius caught it at the 16, avoided the first defender, and cut toward the middle. A lane opened. He accelerated through it. For several seconds, he saw nothing but wet grass and the backs of his blockers. He crossed midfield before the punter forced him toward the sideline. Darius lowered his shoulder, absorbed the contact, and gained another 11 yards. The return set up the Sentinels' first touchdown. Late in the fourth quarter, Lake City led by 3 points. Their opponent had one final possession, but the drive stalled near midfield. With 12 seconds remaining, they lined up to punt and hoped for a return or a penalty that would create one last chance. The ball sailed toward Darius. He could have called for a fair catch. Instead, he saw the coverage unit approaching too aggressively. The outside defender had lost control of his lane. Darius caught the ball, stepped left, and reversed toward the right sideline. The stadium rose. He sprinted past the first wave and crossed midfield. One defender remained. Darius slowed just enough to make the man commit inside, then burst past him along the boundary. He did not score. He did not need to. Darius slid safely as the clock expired. His teammates surrounded him. For the first time in his NFL career, television cameras pushed toward his face. A reporter asked how a practice squad player had delivered the game's biggest plays. Darius looked into the camera. "Practice squad players practice like they're one phone call away from changing everything." The clip went viral. By Monday morning, sports programs were discussing number 42. Fans searched for his background. Fourth Phase's website received more traffic in 6 hours than it had received in the previous 6 months. Darius expected the Sentinels to sign him to the active roster. Instead, Martin Voss offered a 2-year minimum contract with almost no guaranteed money. "You played well," Voss said. "This gives you stability." Darius read every page. The team could release him after the season with little financial consequence. If he remained, his low-cost contract would help the Sentinels manage future roster expenses. The agreement offered stability to the team, not Darius. He placed the contract on the desk. "I'll sign for this season with a guarantee." Voss leaned back. "You're negotiating off 1 game. I'm negotiating off 5 years of being available. You're a special teams player. That's why you called me." Voss's expression hardened. "Be careful not to overestimate your market." Darius stood. "Be careful not to underestimate it." He left without signing. 2 days later, Victor Hale appeared on a national sports business podcast. He never mentioned Darius by name, but he described an unnamed player-owned organization that was allegedly using confidential roster information to profit from housing and player movement. The description was obvious. Within hours, reporters connected the accusations to Fourth Phase. The company's partners began receiving questions. Players worried that membership could damage their careers. A team asked one specialist to disclose whether he had shared internal information. Fourth Phase lost nearly a third of its members in 1 week. Then the league opened a formal review. Darius was called into a meeting with investigators. They asked about his database, his conversations with coaches, and the timing of property purchases near team facilities. Darius answered every question. "We never purchased confidential roster information," he said. "We bought houses near workplaces with temporary labor. Hotels do the same thing." "Did you anticipate player transactions?" "We anticipated that players would continue getting signed and released. That isn't a secret. It happens publicly every week." "Did any team employee provide information?" "No." The investigator studied him. "Why target special teams players?" Darius leaned forward. "Because everybody else already targets them." The review continued for weeks. The Sentinels chose not to activate Darius again. Although he remained on the practice squad, he understood the message. His football opportunity was being used as pressure. Caleb urged patience. "They want you scared enough to sell," he said. "Sell to who? Victor or somebody connected to him? Your company is valuable now. We're losing members. You're losing frightened members. That's different." Lena began investigating Victor's accusations. She reviewed old lending records, rehabilitation referrals, agency agreements, and business registrations. What she found was larger than Darius expected. Victor and 2 other agents had invested indirectly in companies serving fringe players. One provided high-interest advances. Another offered temporary housing at inflated rates. A third billed athletes for relocation services. The agents did not merely profit when players signed contracts. They profited when players were cut, injured, moved, and financially desperate. Fourth phase threatened the entire system. The most damaging evidence came from Malik. Before joining fourth phase, Malik had signed an agreement allowing Victor's affiliated financial company to recover a loan directly from future football income. The paperwork included fees Malik had never understood. Victor had referred to the loan as an advance. Legally, it was far more expensive. Lena located 14 other players with similar agreements. Several agreed to speak confidentially with investigators. Darius faced a decision. He could remain quiet, cooperate privately, and hope to preserve his playing career, or he could challenge the people controlling access to contracts, teams, and financial opportunities. His mother listened while he explained the risks. "You always told me football was your dream," she said. "It is. And what is fourth phase?" Darius looked at the wall of his apartment where an old photograph showed him wearing shoulder pads at 9 years old. "It's what happened after I woke up." Rochelle nodded slowly. "Then protect the thing that protects people." Darius authorized Lena to release the evidence to the league and the players' union. The story exploded. National outlets reported that multiple agents had financial relationships with companies offering loans, housing, and rehabilitation services to vulnerable players. Former clients described paying thousands of dollars in undisclosed fees. Victor denied wrongdoing. He accused Darius of attacking traditional representation to promote his own company. Martin Voss refused to comment. The Sentinels released Darius from the practice squad the next morning. The transaction appeared as a single line on sports websites. Lake City Sentinels released Wr. Darius Reed. Fans who remembered his game-winning return expressed confusion. Analysts assumed the decision involved performance or injury concerns. Darius knew the truth would be difficult to prove. For the first time in 5 years, he packed his locker without wondering whether the team might call him back. Ron Velez stood near the doorway. "I'm sorry," the coach said. "Did you agree with it?" "No." "Did you fight it?" Velez looked down. "Not hard enough." Darius zipped his bag. That's how systems survive. He carried his belongings through the facility and walked into the parking lot. Snow had begun falling. His old pickup truck was covered in a thin layer of white. Darius placed the bag in the back and sat behind the wheel. His phone showed dozens of messages. Some were supportive. Some accused him of destroying his career for attention. One came from an unknown number. "This is Coach Patterson with the Seattle Cascades. Call me." The Cascades were preparing for the playoffs and had lost a starting gunner to a broken arm. Their special teams coordinator had watched Darius's film. The team offered him an active roster contract for the remainder of the season. The salary was respectable, but Darius focused on the language. He requested a guaranteed playoff bonus, coverage for an existing knee condition, and flexibility to continue operating fourth phase within league rules. The Cascades agreed. 3 days after being released, Darius flew to Seattle. He joined the team on Wednesday and played Sunday. The Cascades did not ask him to become a star. They asked him to defeat blocks, make tackles, and protect field position. Darius did exactly that. Seattle reached the conference championship. Although they lost before the Super Bowl, Darius recorded 7 special teams tackles during the playoff run. More importantly, he earned another season in the league. The investigation into Victor Hale continued through the offseason. He eventually lost several clients and faced disciplinary action for undisclosed financial conflicts. 2 affiliated lending companies were sued by former players. Martin Voss remained employed, but league executives began reviewing how teams and agents disclosed outside financial relationships. Fourth phase was cleared of using confidential information. The company's membership returned. Then it grew. The publicity that had almost destroyed the business attracted former players, ethical agents, accountants, and investors who believed in the model. Darius refused offers from private equity groups that wanted controlling ownership. He did not want fourth phase transformed into another company extracting money from athletes. Instead, the business remained partly member-owned. It expanded from housing into relocation, group insurance access, tax preparation, off-season training partnerships, financial education, and emergency support. The most successful division was called Ready Unit. Teams often needed specialists with little notice. Ready Unit maintained a network of trained free agents who kept updated medical records, workout data, travel documents, and position-specific film. The company did not promise contracts. It reduced the chaos between the phone call and the first practice. When a team needed a long snapper on Monday, Ready Unit could help an eligible player arrive, find housing, complete logistics, and prepare by Tuesday. The player paid a transparent membership fee. Teams eventually began paying for portions of the logistical service because prepared athletes saved coaches time. The same roster movement that once drained players financially now created revenue they partially controlled. Darius played 4 more NFL seasons. He never became a household name. He never signed a $100 million contract. His career statistics remained a collection of tackles, returns, and snaps that most fans would overlook. But coaches trusted him. He played for 3 teams, appeared in 2 conference championship games, and earned enough to secure his mother's home. Every contract helped fund fourth phase. Every new city became a potential market. Every locker room introduced him to players facing the same problems. By the time Darius retired at 32, fourth phase operated in 18 professional football cities. It owned or managed dozens of furnished properties and served hundreds of athletes across football, basketball, baseball, and hockey. Its estimated value had passed $40 million. Darius's personal ownership stake made him a millionaire several times over. He celebrated quietly. There was no mansion party, no line of exotic cars, no diamond-covered retirement watch. He returned to East St. Louis and handed his mother a folder containing the paid deed to her home. Rochelle read the first page, then looked at him. "You finally made something real," Darius smiled. "It was real every week, we just didn't own enough of it." Malik Boone became fourth phase's director of player support after his football career ended. Caleb Shaw retired as one of the wealthiest unknown long snappers in league history and joined the company's board. Lena Brooks became general counsel. The first 6-bedroom house remained in operation, although the surrounding neighborhood had changed. A framed photograph hung near the entrance showing Darius, Caleb, Malik, and the original members standing in front of the property during its renovation. Beneath the photograph was the sentence Darius had once shared during a small workshop: "You spend your whole life learning the playbook. Learn the paperwork too." Years later, Darius attended a game in Lake City as a guest of several fourth phase members. The Sentinels were playing under a new general manager. Martin Voss had left the organization after 2 losing seasons. Darius sat in a private suite, but he spent most of the game watching special teams. During the second quarter, a young gunner wearing number 39 sprinted past 2 blockers and stopped a returner inside the 10-yard line. The broadcast immediately cut to commercial. Most fans never learned the player's name. Darius searched for it on his phone. The gunner was 23 years old, undrafted, and living in a fourth phase property near the facility. He had completed a financial education workshop 2 months earlier and contributed part of his practice squad earnings to the member emergency fund. Darius smiled. The young man might be released next week. He might play 10 years. He might never become famous. But he would understand what Darius had learned too late. The NFL's most overlooked players were not merely bodies filling the bottom of a roster. They were workers inside a complex marketplace built on timing, flexibility, and controlled uncertainty. Teams used them to protect salary cap space. Agents used them to generate fees. Service companies used their constant movement to create profit. For decades, the players had been the only ones failing to benefit from their own instability. Darius changed that by recognizing a truth hidden beneath every transaction. A practice squad seat was temporary. The knowledge gained from sitting in it did not have to be. The stars still received the headlines, quarterbacks still appeared in commercials, first-round picks still walked onto draft stages wearing expensive suits. Meanwhile, long snappers bought property, gunners invested their weekly checks, backup kickers formed training companies. Reserve safeties pooled resources instead of accepting predatory loans. The anonymous players had stopped waiting to become celebrities. They had become owners. And Darius Reed, the black practice squad player once valued only because he saved a team money, had built his fortune by understanding exactly why they believed he was replaceable.